Annunciation Radio presents Say Yes to Life with Peter Range, Senior Fellow for Strategic Initiatives at the Center for Christian Virtue.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Say Yes to Life, where we learn to embrace our Catholic faith in the secular world. I'm your host, Peter Range, Senior Fellow for the Center for Christian Virtue, and welcome to show number 470 as we continue the fight for every single human life, born, preborn, and yours in our world. Today, on today's show, we are excited to welcome John Brahier. John Brahier is the Director of Partnerships at Longbeard. In his role, he supports institutions and developers who are seeking to leverage Longbeard's Catholic AI tools to support the evangelizing mission of the church. He supports the ongoing internal evaluation efforts within Longbeard to ensure that the Catholic AI solutions being built are mission-aligned, effective, and positively impacting the church. With 10 years of experience in the Catholic education and ministry sector, he brings a deep understanding and love of the church and a spirit of innovation and missionary zeal to his work. John and his wife Ann live near Detroit, where they're raising their soon-to-be 5 children. And let me just warn John right now, once you get to 5, man, it's just, forget about sleeping, John. It's done. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, this is one of the shows that I'm really looking forward to because John is a friend and he has no idea that I'm just going to pick a fight with him today. No, about AI. No, I'm just kidding. I won't do that to you. Anyway, before we jump in with John, artificial intelligence, let's first go ahead and take 180 seconds around Ohio and the nation to talk about what's happening in the pro-life movement and the news. First, from the Center for Christian Virtue, as we reported last week for the second year in a row, the Center for Christian Virtue has partnered with Brad Wilcox and the Institute for Family Studies to rank every state in the nation on their family structure, chronicling how many people are getting married, staying married, and having children. The data, folks, is clear. Children raised in stable 2-parent homes are twice as likely to graduate from college and significantly more likely to join the middle class as adults. Marriage also provides a major economic safety net. Married men and women are about 80% less likely to live in poverty than their single peers. You can check out more today at FamilyStructureIndex.org. As St. John Paul II said, the future of humanity passes by the way of the family. We got to get that issue right. All right, secondly, from the White House and Life News picking it up as well, a Justice Department report has confirmed that the Biden administration monitored pro-life Christian families and gathered extensive private data on them as a part of their investigators described as the weaponization of federal law enforcement against peaceful pro-life Americans. The nearly 900-page report by the Department of Justice Weaponization Working Group, based on a review of more than 700,000 internal records, I probably used AI for it, details how federal authorities received dossiers that compiled by outside groups on individuals attending pro-life conferences. So if you attended a pro-life conference, they were watching you. The long and short of it is, First Liberty Institute Senior Counsel Jeremy Dyes said that the Department of Justice weaponized the law specifically against the pro-life community. This comes as no surprise, but it's one of those stories that, it just seems too scary to be true. Lastly, and that makes a difference who we put in office. With that being said, lastly, just launched today, or going to be launched here in the next couple minutes, what I've been working on all day, actually for the past couple months, but go to abortioncrimebymail.com. The abortion industry is sending abortion pills into communities across the nation, including pro-life states. Lives are being lost and women are being harmed. You have these crime scenes that are being created in people's bathrooms all across the country. We got to tell Congress and the Trump administration and Biden's mail-ordered abortion scheme and restore medical standards now. So one of the standards that used to be in place is you had to see a doctor first, before this incredibly major decision. Just know, did you have an ectopic pregnancy? Are there other issues physically dealing with before you take these abortion pills? But they're so easily accessible now over the mail that you can just order the abortion pill and it shows up in your mailbox. We had a 34% increase just here in the state of Ohio with abortion-related harm for women. So we're asking you today, go to abortioncrimebymail.com, tell Congress and the Trump administration that we need to put on basic regulations, health and safety standards. Again, it's abortioncrimebymail.com. All right, now it's time for the main event. John Brahier, John is the Director of Partnerships at Longbeard. You heard that correctly. Longbeard. I want him to explain the name of his company at some point. But with that being said, John, maybe before we get into Longbeard, and you're sporting a little bit of a beard today, which makes me just jealous because I'm 44 and still can't grow sideburns. But with that being said, let's go ahead and start with your story, where you're from, and please tell us, if you're willing, about your faith and family journey.
Sure. Well, first of all, Peter, thanks for having me. It's always good to spend time together. And I think it's been about 10 years since I was last on this show.
Wow.
Many years ago, you interviewed me when I was teaching at St. Ursula Academy. So I think when I was on the show, my second oldest niece was just about to be born. So it's very strange for me now being on the show with my fifth child about to be born. So hopefully we get through the next 20 some minutes here before I've got to sprint out and head to the hospital. We got a couple weeks, so we should be okay. But just basic background. I'm from the Diocese of Toledo originally. As you read in the intro, I currently live in Detroit, which is where my wife and her family are from. We have 4 children. We've been really blessed by the Lord in our family life. I've been blessed by really incredible parents, grandparents, godparents. My parents are teachers by training, and so that was very clear in their parenting of my 2 brothers and me. Everything came back to formation, whether that was around the dinner table, on the field, at church, and we've been very blessed by our parents. All 3 of us have been. So from a young age, we were engaged at St. Rose, Perrysburg, which was our home parish. Yeah. They raised us to be altar servers, to be super involved. It was fun during the Easter Triduum, thinking back to really those 3 days as a kid, because those were those pinnacle days, and still are, but they were pinnacle days as altar servers because you got to do all of these things during those liturgies that you didn't get to do at other times of the year. So it was really fun thinking back to those times when I was serving. But again, that's all due to my parents. And with their background in education, it became very clear to me early that somehow formation was going to be part of what I was called to, whether it was teaching, and then more broadly in some different ways now, that helping to share the gospel was something that I'm called to. Now, everyone's called to that, but I felt called to that in a particular way, beyond simply the call to holiness that everyone has. And so through my studies in undergrad, studied math, theology, and secondary education, spent about 10 years in Catholic schools as a teacher, campus minister, and then most recently an associate superintendent in the Archdiocese of Detroit, where our focus and really my focus in the department was on Catholic culture in schools and thinking about what does it mean to be a Catholic school in the 21st century, given the really challenging societal pressures and dynamics that are at play that certainly have an impact on the operations of a Catholic school. And through that, as you can imagine, after the advent of ChatGPT, we were getting hit over and over and over again with questions about AI, pedagogically, culturally, and we were all trying to figure it out. But one of the things that happened is I kept pointing to this company that existed. You referenced Longbeard. Now, as a quick aside, it is fairly ironic that no one at the company actually has a long beard. The scruff on my face is actually probably the longest beard of anyone at the company. Happy to share the story behind the name if that's of interest. But I kept reaching out to them because I knew that they were doing work in this Catholic AI space that I didn't really understand. And over time, we would invite the founder to speak, to review documents, and just really fell in love with their mission. And that led to a role, which is where I'm currently serving.
Fantastic. Well, let me dive in. What is the genesis of the name Longbeard? I want to know that the listener. I could just feel the listeners. They want to know. So
totally. So the founder of the company, Matthew Harvey Sanders, his backstory is fascinating. But in brief, was a seminarian, discerned out of seminary, worked for his archdiocese in Canada, and during that time realized that the church locally was not doing as effective of a job of telling her story as maybe he and many others perceived that she could. And so he desired to form this marketing agency to serve both secular and Catholic institutions alike, and looked for an image that drew both on Catholic heritage, but also on this idea of going out on their own. So in his mind, the two images that came to mind were the pirate going out on his own and the ancient monk with the long beard. And so they were united by the simple visual of the long beard. So hence Longbeard was born.
That's fantastic.
So it began as a marketing agency. And then about 3-4 years ago, with the advent of ChatGPT, the entire company made a pivot into an entirely new line of work, which has really defined what we do today.
Fantastic. Well, I was looking it up as you're speaking a little bit as well. I have it as 2017 when you were last on the show, so nearly 10 years, about 9 years. And John, let me tell you, I'm glad we waited because you've become so much more articulate now and handsome. Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
Ouch.
We're all friends here. We're just having a good time. Speaking of having a good
we
time.
were at the top of the hour. We'll see where we end.
Well, so Bishop Thomas follows this show, so I know he listens weekly, and so he's going to kick me off Catholic radio here at some point after all the mishaps I make. But speaking of mishaps, if you have anything you want to share, not that anybody listens, stories about Deacon Dan Brahier, your father, that we can share. I mean, he's just in charge of, the deacons and everything of that. We'll come. Maybe we'll do another show. We'll have you back on sooner. Well, let's get into artificial intelligence. That's why I brought you here, not to dig up dirt on your father, although I'd love to hear it. So let's just start with a very basic question. What is artificial intelligence? When we're talking about this, what is our topic?
It's a great question because the term AI or artificial intelligence gets used in a lot of different ways. I suppose the best place to start is with the broadest possible definition, which is that AI refers to a field of study. In the same way that like physics is a field of study, AI refers to a field of study in which the prime goal is to have machines replicate aspects of human behavior. Now, the field has existed for just under a century at this point, but in terms of the public consciousness about AI, of course, that's really just a few years old in serious ways. The document Antiqua et Nova, which to date is the church's most formal teaching on AI, puts it this way. AI, and this is not an exact quote, but it's a decent paraphrase. AI is better thought of not as a different form of intelligence, but as a product of human intelligence. So it's this, again, field of study in which machines are trained to replicate aspects of human behavior. Now, colloquially, when we use the term AI, we're often referring to a particular type of artificial intelligence technology called generative AI, which is, if you can imagine, a series of concentric circles or ovals, just one subset within the field of AI. But generative AI includes things like ChatGPT, where you can throw in a query or a search, and you'll have something, whether it's an image, a video, text, generated in response. At their basic level, AI, these generative AI tools are informed by large language models that take in massive amounts of data, look for patterns, and then again can do predictive completion based on a query, search, or other input. There are many different kinds, but again, generative AI is frequently what people are talking about when they use the term AI, quote unquote.
Okay, that's super helpful to kind of level set. Let me level set from my perspective before the next question. I'm going to take the position for the rest of the interview that artificial intelligence is actually, in fact, the devil. And then you'll have to no, I'm just kidding. Let's start and demonstrate that it's not actually the devil, although, we can get into that a little bit. But no, tell us about your work with AI at Longbeard, because I've actually used Magisterium AI, which I think is just a tremendous resource. And even the pro-life movement. I mean, I was using AI the other day. I said, give me all the pro-life leaders in the 50 states and their contact information, because I'm doing this campaign, as we mentioned, abortion, the male crime that we're seeing and everything. So I want to contact all the pro-life leaders, and I have that at my fingertips. Now, I'm thinking back to my arguments or discussions with my wife about AI and how maybe sometimes the length that it takes to research is actually a good thing for us. But with all that being said, long preface to this question, tell us about your work at Longbeard with AI. What are you doing with it?
So I suppose actually backing up might be helpul, because you can't throw out the AI is the devil without actually engaging that a little bit. Okay. I certainly think it's reasonable to say that the devil can use things that we create, right, to distract us, to tempt us, right? Pope Francis, when he addressed the G7 in, this would have been June of 2024, he made the argument that human beings have always existed in what he called a techno-human condition, basically arguing that our experience of the created world has always been mediated by some form of technology, whether it's a very simple form of technology or tool like a knife, or an incredibly complex tool like a cell phone, AI, whatever it might be. And his basic point that he brought up was simply that we have always existed in some sort of mediated state where there is something, or some things in most cases, that have allowed us to interact with the world. And for all of human history, there's been discernment about how to use these tools and technologies appropriately. Now, of course, AI and a knife are very different things, and so he went on to point that out. But at least that principle, I think, is worth thinking about. So to fast forward to Longbeard, basically, our work falls into three different categories. So we call ourselves a Catholic AI company, and the basic premise for what we do is to build and scale AI for the Catholic Church. So the three basic buckets for our work fall into app development, data projects, and algorithms. So to start at the top level, and again, just briefly, you referenced Magisterium AI. That's our most well-known app. Effectively, it functions quite like ChatGPT in a lot of ways. People can go to the website, magisterium.com, download the app. They can ask it a question. And what Magisterium AI does is it crawls through this database that we've curated of church documents. So to date, we have just over 30,000 church documents in the database, and they range from papal encyclicals to ecumenical council statements to writings of saints, church fathers, doctors of the church, to more modern scholars as well. And what Magisterium AI does is it will search through that database, find documents that are relevant to whatever the query was, and it will use those documents to generate a response, which gives a response by definition from a Catholic worldview, because it's simply drawing from those documents as opposed to the open internet. And then as part of the app, it points you back to the original sources, which you can read in any language, effectively any language, right on the site. You can click the footnotes, the in-text citations, and be taken right back to source documents that otherwise might have either been hard to find or, frankly, in some cases, have never been digitized before. And so you've got incredible access to these documents. So that's the app level. On the data level, we have a hub in Rome called the Alexandria Digitization Hub. And this hub has partnered with roughly a half dozen of the pontifical universities to do some form of digitization of their libraries. So physical documents, books, other types of documents in their libraries that we are digitizing in conjunction with them. The hub itself has these robotic scanners. You can find videos of them online, but it's absolutely wild to watch them work. They have robotic arms with wind suction technologies that will automate the turning of pages and then allow for rapid scanning of documents. So wow. I think, if I remember correctly, the data point is that we can digitize up to 2,500 pages an hour, which is just a huge volume. But given the ocean of Catholic documents, it's still a fairly small amount. But this allows us to digitize documents and then make more available to Catholics who otherwise would have to fly to Rome to go check out a book from these libraries. Mm-hmm. So that's the second project. The third one is that under the hood of any AI tool is one or more large language models. Now, all of these models that exist presently are not Catholic by design. And so any Catholic AI project involves to some extent the use of secular tools, which by their very nature they struggle, we'll put it that way, they struggle to consistently represent church teachings. That's not their design. Mm-hmm. And so our question has been, can we build a specialized language model only trained on the wisdom of the church, so that in the future, Catholic AI work, as AI becomes more ingrained in all of these workflows in parish life and beyond, all of that work can be actually grounded on a Catholic language model. So we've been developing one called Ephraim that hasn't been publicly released. We're still working on it behind the scenes. But we see that as one of the future kind of necessities, frankly, for the church operating in the digital space as AI just becomes ingrained digitally. So really those three buckets form the main work of Longbeard.
Love it. Let me ask this because, gosh, I feel like we got 7 minutes, John. We're just like digging into just scratches. No,
it's the teacher in me. Sometimes I go too long.
No, you're not. You're perfect. It's so interesting to me. So the next question is, what excites you about AI and what frightens you? Two things that you just said that frighten me. and you can respond to them, or maybe they frighten you as well. But one is with Magisterium AI, you mentioned modern scholars. And knowing you, I know that you're not going to be participating in bringing in like super progressive people who want to like change a church and things of that nature. But it is a danger. Like your founder, you will one day die, and I'll see you in heaven, please God. But people can go back in at some point and change maybe the documents that there's access to, right? So is there something that, is there safeguards towards, we want the authentic teaching of the church? Secondly, my companies, we've fully embraced AI. One of the questions that I think have been legitimately brought up is that we're using Google, and it's like, okay, well, we're training our AIs to, respond to that we're pro-life, for example, when we're asking a question, because if you don't train it, if you will, then it's going to respond in a more secular, way. But can you ever train what Google is in charge of to have a Christian or Catholic worldview? And I would argue, well, no. And ultimately, like if you're a part of their system, you might set up these roadblocks or these barriers, but they can get in at the end of the day. If they own the keys to everything, at the end of the day, they can get in. So how do we prevent that, I guess, from happening if we're engaging in this in some way, shape, or form? So you don't have to respond to those thoughts. You might touch on them, but what are your thoughts? What excites you and what frightens you?
I'll start with, I'll tackle both of those. I think the latter is a very valid concern, and it's even more broadly throughout the church. You're right. We can prompt engineer as much as we want, but the source data doesn't change unless we do something about it. And that's why for us internally, Ephraim, this Catholic language model, is incredibly important for us to build. Not just for us, but for, frankly, the church moving forward. Because you are exactly right that not only can the companies, they have access to the language models that they've created, but the source data they're trained on, unless that's very carefully curated, is going to contain a lot of interesting corners of the internet that we really don't want Catholic AIs to be trained on. So I think that's a very valid concern. Generally speaking, I would share a lot of your high-level concerns and points of optimism without you having gone through them. Like that's basically my mindset, is that there are some things that are very exciting to me about AI, and there are some things that are incredibly concerning to me. And I think that's generally true at our company as well. And frankly, it's why we exist, because we're concerned by some of the bigger secular frontier labs. We don't think that they have the church's aims in mind. So if we want to be using AI, we need faithful Catholics building this stuff. To go back, though, we referenced earlier, I have 4 little kids, a 5th on the way. When my students started running into my office in fall of 2022 with ChatGPT saying, like, Mr. Brahier, look at ChatGPT, look at what it can do. What I was processing was, look at all these different ways I can cheat, or some version of that. But immediately my thought went to my kids and what kind of world are they going to grow up in? And we could deep dive into any of the possible concerns, but at a high level, I share a lot of concerns. I would guess we share a lot of concerns about its impact potentially on the human person. I guess to speak to one of them specifically, the deepest that I have, especially in the educational world, sometimes it gets called mirroring. Early on, one of the things that occurred was that over time and fairly quickly, people realized, like, wow, these tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever tool you're using, it's sounding more human. And that was one of the first kind of realizations that people made. But I think subtly that actually had it backwards, because my deeper concern is that over time we actually start to sound more like ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. Like that's the deeper concern, I think, is that we look at the outputs as ideal. Even if we don't say that or acknowledge that, subtly we start to behave that way. There was a study that came out maybe a year ago from Florida State University that looked at conversation style podcasts. So actually kind of like this one, where it was unscripted, just conversation between multiple people. And they looked at pre-2022 and then post-2022, right around the launch of ChatGPT. And what they found is that there was a spike in a very particular set of words that were used after the launch of ChatGPT that perhaps unsurprisingly are words that are used very frequently by ChatGPT. Which suggests a really interesting internalization that was taking place. By reading these words, we ingrain them a little bit more deeply in our minds and then are more likely to use them. Yeah. And in some ways, that's not a new thing, right? That's happened with Google Autocomplete, many forms of technology. Like you read a book, you're more likely to use the terms and ideas in the physical book itself, right? So it's not a new thing. But again, it goes all back to your point of who's building these tools. What's the data that they're using to build them? And then what are the subtle things that we might miss that are being ingrained in our worldviews?
Yeah.
And so again, that's really the foundation for our company, is that if this is going to exist, which seems like that's where we're going, there should be a Catholic solution.
So my wife, who reads much more frequently than I do, brought up to me a very interesting quote. And like most of my shows, I don't do any research for them. So I don't have where the quote came from. But she said the Industrial Revolution changed the way that we work to like a detriment. Like it became about serving the economy much more than it became about, and like even Rerum Novarum, it was about, yes, you can go into the city to work, but ultimately to go back and so you can own some land and have a farm and be connected to God's kind of green earth. Like there was this sense of like, there is an ultimate good, and the ultimate good is family on the land together versus family separate, one person out there working and so on and so forth. So the Industrial Revolution changed the way that we work in a negative impact in that sense. Will the AI revolution, you kind of touch on this a little bit, will it change the way we think in a negative way, or can it do it in any positive ways? What are your thoughts on that kind of perspective?
Yeah, and I suppose actually even going back, I didn't fully answer your question, because you also asked, like, what are you excited about?
Yeah.
Right? I tend to dwell sometimes on the negative.
Well, that's what we're all about here. Say yes to life. Just focus on. No, I'm just kidding.
No. So I suppose just to briefly address that, and I'll segue that into to this question as well. I think that there are creative opportunities that exist in the AI world that simply, not that they didn't exist, but they weren't as accessible in the pre-AI world. So, for example, the ability to have an idea about an app or a new technology and just say, I'm going to go build this thing, 5 years ago required you to know how to code. Today, you can do that on your own tonight. Like, you could go home and build an app that serves a purpose that you have in your life. So when I look at your question, like, will this change the way we think? Yeah, it's going to do a lot more than that. It's going to change the way we think. It's going to change the way we work and the way we relate to each other, which in some ways is terrifying. And I would share in that fear in some ways. But it's also important just to acknowledge this is going to happen. There is going to be change. So let's discern how we engage and how we actually walk forward as a church with this technology.
John, we were just scratching the surface, so much to go, but thank you so much for coming on, having this conversation, putting up with my bad sense of humor. But folks, let's continue to pray, discern, ask where the Lord is leading us, and continue to say yes to life.